We are rolling live on episode 20 of the Capital Spotlight podcast. Your host, as always, Craig McGrother, with the principal and co-founder of the firm, Todd Beardsley, and with the special distinguished guest, a very important person, because without this guy, this wouldn't all be here. So, Todd Beardsley, Rob's dad, who was the co-star, along with Ina, of the Lone Star Summit event just a couple weeks ago. How are you today?
Doing very well.
Good.
Very well. Enjoying being here in New York.
Yeah. How long have you been here for? About 10 days now or more?
Couple weeks.
Okay. And then maybe another week left as well?
Yeah, 6 days maybe, right?
Yeah. And you've been enjoying yourself, walking around,
Yes.
eating well?
Oh, it's been great. I enjoy the wonderful weather. Restaurants are fantastic. And enjoying it a little bit more each time I come here. You know,
Yeah.
coming from California, I'm not a huge New York fan, but I'm warming up to it.
Right.
And so I've been coming here for a few years, and it's getting better each time.
It's funny you should say that because this has been my favorite experience in New York. We've been eating exceptionally well. Last night we had a great dinner with Ilya at Carbone, so that was awesome. And then you also said, I think not on this conversation yet, but we'll get into it, that your favorite meal was at Fort Charles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that was fantastic. Everything was extremely tasty. Oh, I'm ready to go again.
Me too.
Yeah.
We got to go.
I'm actually kind of getting hungry that we're talking about this. We have a great dinner tonight as well in store, as always. You can expect nothing less. So we've been both enjoying the great food, and then obviously the final last legs of weather, as you know, that's going to be gone for the next 6 months. So lucky us on that front. We have a packed show today, so we're excited about having you on the show, as you were, as it was mentioned, such a star of the event. But I guess tell us a bit about where you're from.
I'm from San Jose. Grew up there and live there today still. And graduated from college in 1990 from San Jose State University with a master's in marketing and BS in finance. And after college, it was a recession in 1990, and graduated with an MBA. Here I am in Silicon Valley. Couldn't get a job. Interviewing. Finally backdoored into real estate, selling single-family homes.
Right. So let's get into your career professionally. So you said you backed into single-family homes. Funny enough, we were kind of joking about this before the show, and that was that I had the weird idea to sell homes, and that was kind of always my plan. And then, of course, it deviated with networking and meeting people and becoming such good friends with Rob. You, on the other hand, had the opposite experience, which is probably the more common experience, which is that, you kind of fall butt backwards. To not curse on the show, but you kind of fell butt backwards into it. Do you feel as if your degree from San Jose State prepared you at all or helped you with your business, or do you think it was not necessary in hindsight?
There really wasn't a lot of value to having a degree selling single-family homes. Most people don't have any sort of applicable real estate background when they go into selling single-family homes. It's pretty straightforward, and there's lots of training available. Being able to analyze numbers, I think, maybe was helpful a little bit in accounting, but no, not much.
Right. So you sold homes, but also, and you did that for 30 years because you had Menlo Atherton Realty, correct? Was that the name of the brokerage? Mm-hmm. So you had that, you ran that with Ina, of course, your wife. But then you also did some other kind of interesting things in the real estate sector too, correct? I think you did maybe some development or some flips. Can you walk us through that as well?
Sure. Going back to, I think, early 90s, I was, doing some remodels and buying some parcels and building a couple of times, built a home, and always had my desires focused on trying to do something other than just sell homes. And I was looking at apartments back in the early 90s and trying to figure out how I could, not just the 90s, into the 2000s, I was still trying to figure out how I could do it. And I just couldn't really figure out how to put it all together, the piece of the puzzle of apartments. And so I never did any apartments, just did some remodels, single-family home remodels and flips kind of thing, and that was it.
Right. Very cool. And then you kind of saw, just from taking a step back a bit, the business totally changed in residential from no computers really probably necessary to the full MLS, where you have to fax, print everything out. How interesting was it for you to see the shift of the market changing in that regard, the shift of the industry changing, and then also the implementation of computers, because Rob's very computer savvy. Dasha as well is very computer savvy. It seems as if that runs in the family. So you're probably on the forefront of that, as opposed to kind of the traditional way, which is the dinosaur business, where most realtors are in real estate, maybe not the brightest bulbs, and probably were not wanting to adapt very well. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and I was very fortunate enough to be early into the computers enough where it caught with me. A few years later, and I wouldn't have probably. But I got into computers. I was typing in college, so I knew how to type. I was very interested in the computers, and so all of that was the improvements to the real estate industry were fantastic. I loved it. It was more efficient. I'm all about efficiency, so I loved all of that. And speaking about computers, the kids, I had them a computer when each of them had a computer when they were 2. And they were doing SpongeBob typing by the time they were maybe 4.
Yes.
Right.
And so I started them off early. I remember one time when Dasha was, I think, in like first grade or second grade, and they started typing, doing something, and she could already just blaze through the keyboard. And
what an advantage it is for our generation to be basically so adapted. I guess there's not much of an advantage if everyone's doing it or more people are, but so convenient to kind of be integrated with computers at a very early age. Because my parents are not computer savvy at all. Like my dad can barely cut and paste, okay, for instance. So it's funny to have the other end of the spectrum, and I think I have that slight level of computer literacy, which you always remind me of, which is funny. So I think it definitely does stem from the parents one way or another. And I wish I was a little bit more computer sound and savvy, but it's one thing that I am working to overcome, funny enough. Yeah. So switching into raising Dasha and Rob, as they're both, of course, working for the company, did they give you and Ina a hard time growing up, or were they pretty easy to raise?
Well, Rob was a bit of a pain in the butt some of the time, right? He was very difficult with Dasha. It was just any siblings. Same thing as any siblings would do. But once they left the house, he was very protective. And so that was the main thing for me is I understand when they're at home, they're going to fight and scuffle around. But as long as outside in the real world, he was protecting, I was okay with it. But neither of them really strayed too far. There was no real rules that we had. It was pretty easy and loose because the kids were very well behaved, and I was always around. We had adults home all the time.
Right.
We were working from home, and the kids just grow up very, very mature due to that.
Right. So, but that's not the case for everyone, because there's parents around, and the kids are, a little bit rambunctious.
And you have somebody in mind when you say that?
Well, listen, just saying generally speaking,
yes.
I, grew up where I grew up in Menlo Park, not too far from where you are for, going from, living in Atherton mostly. But I know some kids whose parents were around, but they, couldn't give a flying you-know-what regarding that. So that's not the case for everyone. Maybe they're just more grounded. So interesting that they didn't give you that hard of a time, which is nice. But, it's funny, Dasha's let me know every now and then that you may have been a certain type of way, and then obviously grew out of that, of course. And now you're a lovely boss and a male role model in her life, of course, which is great. So that's cool. With that said, what were some of the house rules that you maybe put in place, or I guess didn't put in place? Or, were you guys really strict? Were you really on it?
So I wouldn't really say it was strict. I was always letting the kids make their own decisions. And so I was there to watch those decisions and give them guidance during those decisions. So it really wasn't so much about rules as it was just always steady guidance, just always there. So no real rules. It was probably a lack thereof. My kids became very, very disciplined. I think just from the parents being there and watching, being involved, monitoring whatever is going on. And so, no, not much in the way of rules. Oh, he's got something.
Well, from my perspective, there weren't many rules. But what there was a high level of respect demanded. And so maybe they weren't explicit rules, but you knew very well when a rule was broken. And there was punishment doled out for that.
Yes.
And so with that dynamic created a sense of respect for authority, which is also not easy to do when you're also simultaneously trying to be friends with your kids.
Yes.
right? So you toe the line of, okay, I'm friendly, but then the lines get blurred. Just like how we talked about on this show, how you and I have a very awesome, unique relationship of friends, but then also coworkers, and then at times, boss and employee, right? So that is a difficult dynamic, but if you're shooting for the stars and you want to have the best relationship possible, I just think that is what you should go for. People say don't mix business with pleasure, or don't mix family and money. Well, we're doing it all. We're doing all of it right here.
A ton of cross-pollination in that regard for sure.
Yes.
And you said this before when we were speaking on this, that you wanted to be friends with your kids. So was that something that you had in your life as well? What was kind of your philosophy on wanting to, I guess, choose that path? Because some parents are uber strict. We all heard of the phrase helicopter parents or tiger moms or whatever it is, tiger dads. So what was that thought process? Is that how you were raised, or just maybe that was something that was slightly different from your upbringing that you wanted to implement in your household when you were making your family?
I think primarily it came from, I grew up as just a wild child, and it was a very tumultuous environment. I was always in trouble, and I gave my parents a lot of grief. And I knew that I wasn't going to have that in my world, in my home. I didn't want it, I wasn't going to have it. And I maybe foolishly thought, well, if they're my best friend, then maybe we won't have any of this grief. And so that was my goal. I was set out to make make me be their best friend. So I was always their friend. I was always their buddy, always hanging out. And I think that, like, to your point about respect, I think if you're there every day as a friend, you're going to respect that friend. Yeah, you'll be joking back and forth, but there's that respect. So that's kind of the genesis, is me not wanting craziness in my household. And as you can attest to, my number one priority is peace. I want peace, harmony, and that was what I was all about.
Right. So were you and Ina, for the most part, always on the same page with how you wanted to parent Rob and Dasha?
Well, as you know, she's from Russia, and she's an only child.
Is that where the respect comes from, and also the computer literacy, might I think? Or is that your Swedish background to pair those things?
No, it's... She just let me kind of, I was the American, and I should know how to run an American household and American kids. And so she deferred to me and let me kind of do it my way. And it was different than her way, but she gave me all the leeway in the world. And so I kind of more or less dictated how the flow of things would go in terms of punishment, rules, and other things. As they got older, we'd have kids over and they'd get crazy, and I would be like, no, it's okay, we'll let them, they'd have pool parties and stuff. So but I was there. I was always there. Whatever they were doing, I was there.
Right, that's awesome. So, and Rob's always told me how involved you were in his life. Similarly, my dad was involved with all of our lives. We would play golf every single weekend. Saturday, Friday, maybe we'd join him after school, play the last 3 or 4 holes with them, and then go to the 19th hole while they're having drinks, just chit-chatting with the adults, which I think paired really nicely for my development, just with speaking with people, whether it be in our business now, of course, but he also coached us as well. Did you coach Rob and Pop Warner? Because I know football was really big in your house, NJB, if you did basketball. I don't know if you played basketball or not, but were you participating in coaching? Because my dad coached all of us in Little League, and like you, very busy professional, but he made time for us, which is so special, and that's not a privilege everyone gets. You know me, I think I'm one of the more respectful people that you know, and likewise you are too, and that I think comes from, for sure, having a very strong father figure in your life. So back to the question, did you coach Dasha and Rob in sports?
I did some coaching for sure. I started out the process, once I had a son, I wanted to be a baseball coach, and I wanted to ride that out as far as I could go, and started with t-ball, and that lasted maybe 1 year, and he quit. He didn't want baseball, and I was just heartbroken.
He's a quitter.
He was 5 or 6 years old, and he was like, nah, this isn't for me, it's too boring, because he would stand in the outfield and just nothing going on.
Right.
So he quit that, and then started playing basketball and other stuff, and so I was coaching basketball with them, and middle school, was kind of the pinnacle. I think we went, what was it, 3 seasons with 1 loss?
Something like that.
I forget what it was. It was 2 or 3 seasons with just 1 loss. So we did fairly well in middle school, though. But,
Right.
And then high school, I just wasn't, good enough of a basketball coach to do anything there. But and then football, I forget what year it was, but I was not coaching, but I was just always there, always around, going to practices, supporting, going to every game, that kind of thing.
And that's typically the transition, is because most people, it's almost bizarre because like you have, until I would say after middle school, grade school, whatever it may be, once you get into high school, it's like, okay, let the professionals and the best of the best kind of do it, who are getting paid to be here and are doing it. It's not really the parents' job anymore at that point. Maybe NJP is slightly different if you're with a travel team. I know, for instance, kind of random, but Oakland Soldiers, maybe there would be, a basketball coach that was a parent or something like that. But by and large, it seems as if it's the professionals are there doing that, whether it be kind of people that played in college or professionals that are giving back now, or just in the community, or perhaps a teacher and whatnot. That's how it's set up, at least for me at St. Francis. And I'm sure likewise to Menlo Atherton, it was that way as well. So it's really cool to hear that you were so involved, just like my dad. And it's funny, the imprint and the fingerprint that does leave. And it's funny, I don't know if you were like this, but I can speak to my dad. He was a bit of a yeller, so we got yelled at. So he could have run a little hot. Was he a yeller?
No, not at all.
No, I no big ups, no big downs. I'm just a calm guy, all in all. And so
Right.
I never got riled up on anything. I'd get mad, but I wouldn't really say anything. I didn't want the parents, I didn't want the coaches to think I'm one of those parents that's, play my kid. Or,
Right.
I didn't want to do that.
So funny. So my dad was yelled a little bit, but not like a big deal, not like abusive. But there was another coach that was the other co-coach who, interestingly enough, was probably the Little League coach for 20 years, which is an interesting story in itself, with no kid on the team, which is more rare than not, but that's another topic for another day. But he was a chronic and known yeller, so much so from a Little League team, people didn't even want to play on the team, which is kind of funny.
Wow.
And yeah, exactly. So he was known throughout as that person. So, but that's maybe why if someone yells or barks at me, I actually take it very well. So I take criticism easily. So I'm sure, like you've always been coached from sports, how applicable that is and moves forward into just relationships generally. And, probably as an employee or working or, I guess on your end now having employees, kind of running a company, which is all kind of intertwined together, which I think is cool. But with that said, there was a really big and pivotal moment, I think we've talked about this, in your life and also for the family's, I guess, long-term outlook, I guess if you could say, is that was the move from San Jose to Atherton. So that was a huge thing for you in many aspects. What was that experience like? How stressful was it? And, what was the kind of the wise logic and foresight on that decision?
Well, we were, in San Jose for many years, and it got time for the kids to go to school, and obviously that's a concern. So the primary driver was school, because I knew I can't send them into the schools where we were. And so it so happened that I was doing all right at the time, and I thought I could, make that jump to some good school district. So I started looking around, and I then also kind of combined that with the idea of making it an investment, or more of an investment. So what I ended up landing on was moving to Atherton, and the crummiest house on the street, basically.
Right. Which is, by the way, real estate 101, the smartest thing to do.
And I knew that it would be safe. I could plow all my money into that, and I knew I'd be okay in the end. And so, I wanted the kids to see, I wanted a great education. I wanted them to see what living among rich people was like. And we weren't by any stretch. We were the poor people on the street, and that's how they grew up. And after we moved, there was some tough times living there, and the house always needed some work, and it consumed a lot of our money. And it was, anyway, so the kids got to see struggle. They would see the struggle. They knew that life just wasn't all peaches and cream and easy. So it was good, though. It was very, very good. They got to see, this is what you can achieve. These people with $10, $20 million houses, some of them with $1 million cars, and us with our not $1 million cars.
Was it a minivan, maybe?
Oh,
any
yes,
minivan? Okay.
yes, indeed.
Okay.
So it was a great experience, I think, for the kids to grow up not being real rich like that. And I think it's a fundamental aspect of both of their makeups, is that they grew up, you can't say poor because you're in Atherton, but compared to the rest of the people on the street, we were.
Well, it's all relative and due to your circumstance, right? So I felt as if being in Menlo Park that we were just a middle class family. But there's nothing. There's no such thing as really as a middle class family in Menlo Park if you own real estate where you live. So that's just the funniest thought process you're in. But that's all you know. But to your point, rich is multiple ways. There's rich in relationships, rich in family, rich from a wealth perspective. So maybe the wealthiest people could be the most broken people inside. And I'm sure if you ask those people, they might say trade all the money in the world to feel happy. Actually, truly. So you mentioned that you put a lot of work into the house. Are we talking like flooring, kitchen, everything to how that worked, and landscaping? Because Atherton, for those who don't know, bigger lots, more maintenance, right? So is it basically just an ongoing process of basically this, that? Did you kind of itemize what you wanted to do to start? Did you do multiple remodels? Walk us through maybe that process.
It was just a continuous process. We didn't have the money to do the whole property in one shot. So it was just continue a little bit here, a little bit there. And, definitely bathrooms, kitchen, flooring, all kinds of things, everything. It was it was a terrible condition home, and we had to do everything to it.
Yeah.
So it was one thing I wanted to go back to, what's kind of interesting is when the kids were little, I started telling them this, is that, they'd see everything around them, and you don't know the difference, right? You grow up in that, and you just, it's
your reality.
It's your reality.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to understand that they grew up in a bubble, which is America, inside a bubble, which is California, inside a bubble, which is Silicon Valley, inside a bubble, which is Atherton. And that is something I think was very, very important, and I would always say that to them so that they wouldn't lose track of what reality really was, because this wasn't reality. I mean, as you know, so yeah, that was one thing I wanted to go back to. But what was the question?
Yeah, I was just saying, I was going back to just the experience and living in Atherton in reference to kind of the work and the projects done to it specifically, but just, what that felt like and what it was like. And I guess your perspective on the matter, did you feel as if, you were, compared to your friends, I guess, maybe not the richest person there, or did you feel just like a normal kid on your end?
No, I mean, you could feel the difference if you're going to a friend's house and you go, oh, wow, this is nice. This is different. And I didn't have a problem with it. It didn't make me feel uncomfortable or anything. I think it's good. It's a very good thesis to get us early exposure to wealth, and in the end, like the whole plan all along, all of a sudden you're going to school with kids who come from very successful families. People are conducting themselves at a higher level, and there's no reason for you not to just rise to that level as well. So I think that worked out really, really well, while also keeping us grounded, which is a really great best of both worlds, because if you grow up rich, what's your struggle? Your struggle is apathy. If you grow up poor, what's your struggle? Lack of opportunity, right? Lack of access to education, capital, etc., relationships. So if you can mix the two together, that's a superpower. And so I think that was, and it's a bit on accident, because if you had more money, or if the timeline was shifted, then that would have changed, right? Because you can't just necessarily plan to thread this needle perfectly. So we were fortunate, and I think I'm fortunate that, we started off and kind of grew over time, so that my foundational mentality was set, and then able to grow from there. Because I think if you stay poor, or legitimately poor, for long enough, you are likely going to develop a victim mentality and harbor resentment against people who are successful and wealthy. So that's a risk of staying poor too long. So you want to be poor for a bit, but not too long to get the negative of that.
So I was thinking about this, back to your bubble comment, then I have a follow-up question to that. So the bubble comment is interesting because when I was going, because I went to Hillview, or Oak Knoll, then Hillview, excuse me. You probably went to Encinal, and then Hillview. So that's an uber bubble. That's basically the most private school that's a public school that you could probably find in America. And then I went to St. Francis, And it was like, oh, there's actually, from a socioeconomic perspective, more of a melting pot of people. There's people that are on scholarships. There are people whose parents, founded Snapchat or put the VC equity for Snapchat, or, you name it, just like centimillionaires and probably arguably some billionaires that attended that school that I was classmates with. And then there's, people all the way in the middle, which is probably what my family was, or maybe slightly higher than that, probably for sure, knowing how successful my dad is. And then the bigger bubble, the bigger jump was going to University of Arizona, where it's like, oh yeah, you're, dealing with people that maybe are from Tucson, whose parents never went to college, or, their parents, maybe they have one parent, maybe their parent passed away. So it's just so crazy. You just get exposed to so much more the more you kind of leave home, and you go into New York, definitely probably changed that. You go into Carnegie Mellon, probably give you a different perspective as well. So that's all kind of interesting how that plays in. But
there's a good point going back to, Atherton. So he was going into the homes of all these people, some of them wealthy, some of them not. But, there was plenty of those people that he was going into their home. And I would always preach to him, I'd say, you have a brand and you need to protect that brand. And when you're presenting yourself to these people, you need to behave in a certain way, because someday you might come to these people and, because I always thought he'd be a venture capitalist of some sort. And
so you smelt the entrepreneur in it.
Well,
the entrepreneur nature.
It's all around us.
Yeah.
I mean, kids at school, they're talking about starting companies. In middle school, they're talking about stuff. So, but I was always preaching brand, because you just don't know who you're going to talk to later and actually try to do business with or need something from. Not need, but
extract in one way or another, or create a mutually beneficial relationship. And it's funny you should say that, because my dad was always big about that. My dad grew up, had food but was not wealthy, with where his situation was, and the biggest thing for him was to provide us a great opportunity, provide us, with more than he had. But also the biggest thing is like, hey, protect your name and your legacy, because that's everything, and all you have at the end of the day is your last name. And you just don't know, and you don't want to stain the family's name, because it's not just my name, but it's my siblings' names. If you're acting out of line, that is all, a reflection of us. And that was so big for him. My dad was so funny. He made us wear collared shirts every day to Oakville and Hillview, because he wanted us to look a certain type of way. And I didn't realize it was like, you're torturing us. But it was how he saw it. Yeah. And he probably thinks it's silly. I find it to be slightly neurotic on his end. That's what I thought at the time. But I see it now fully. Yes. And it just, it's funny how these things kind of unfold and work out how they do. Question for you, Rob, is, your mom and dad both worked. Do you think it was really helpful to see both your parents work from a work ethic perspective? Because I know seeing my dad come home every single day, suit and tie, and then my mom was a grinder as well. She didn't work, in the corporations, but raising 4 boys is no small task, that are playing sports, that are going to school in Los Altos, and then also Menlo Park, driving to and fro from every place, coordinating and sorting out all of, the various activities and the clubs, this, that. So it was a full-time job on her end. Sometimes I argue it's like my dad's job ended at a certain point of the day. My mom's never ended, right? So do you think it was important and kind of shaped some of your work ethic to see both your parents work, and then your mom and dad both kind of taking care of a lot of the house responsibilities?
Yeah, for sure. We grew up seeing both my parents work really hard. My dad work really hard, take a lot of risk as well. And I'm not sure if we talked about this, but I think you mentioned how even keel you are. You don't like strife, you like peace. But at the same time, you're very capable of handling a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And I think that's where mine comes from as well, because I do believe I have a very strong ability to handle a lot of stress and pressure, which is exemplified throughout my upbringing as well as into my adult career. So seeing that growing up is super helpful. And another thing on top of similar is the fact that both of them were home. So my dad didn't come home at the end of the day in a suit and tie. He was just home all day, and so was I. And so I'm hearing him on the phone all day in the office do real estate deals, talking about escrows, talking about contingencies, talking about inspections,
liens, titles,
debt, everything.
Yeah.
Negotiation, how to handle the seller, all this stuff. And so I definitely soaked up more real estate than I had even understood. But on a more basic level, one thing I soaked up which I'm incredibly grateful for, and I feel like this is my favorite piece of advice to give people, and it so happens to be a pet peeve now, which is I really don't like when parents talk to their kids like babies. Oh. I hate it. I see it on the street, and okay, Sonny, now let's go here. Why? What's the point? Who is that benefiting, right? You spoke to me like a man before
From day one. Yeah.
Right? And I cannot wait to have a son and just talk to a baby like, all right, let's go. We're going to go do some underwriting.
Yeah.
So I think my dad had some tenderness, but my dad's a total alpha. If you meet him at some point, you'll understand right away where my personality comes from. I think once you meet my dad, and if you give him a couple glasses of wine, it'll unfold a bit with my humor, probably my mannerisms, my cadences, and such. So that's really cool that you think that, and then you went through that, and that's how you want to do it, and how he did it for you, which is cool. And you know, generations are getting softer, so I wonder why, right? So, that said, what did you see in Rob's childhood that correlated to entrepreneurial success? Was he the kid that was buying candy bars and flipping them and selling them elsewhere? Was he just always thinking about, various or elaborate business ideas at a young age where it was just, not how a normal kid thinks? What did you see that was like, oh, that's interesting, that's a little bit different?
Tomatoes.
Yeah, so...
No, go ahead.
Well, yeah, we had a lot of tomatoes, and the kids would sell them. So that was one of the businesses that the kids would work on, is pull a wagon around and sell tomatoes in the neighborhood and stuff when they were little. We had a ton of tomatoes. When you have an acre, what do? You grow tomatoes.
Right.
So entrepreneurial things, I can't really say there was a ton of things, because he wasn't really creating businesses. He was just more kind of how he is now, right? He's very on point. He was always on point. Everything had to be a certain way. This is the kid that would come home from school when they were little. I don't know what grade it was, what years they were, but he'd come home on Monday. They'd give you all the homework for the whole week. So you'd have 1 week of homework, and he'd bang it all out on Monday. And he just had to. He couldn't do anything until he got his homework done. So it's not really entrepreneurial, but it's a discipline. Commitment and discipline. And I think that there's one story I think is powerful. Well, there's a lot of them, but there was a football game. It was a regular game, it wasn't playoffs, but he was really sick. He had a flu, and he's the quarterback, and they only had one quarterback. And so basically, if he didn't play, they're going to lose the game. And, as parents, we were like, oh, maybe don't play, but I was hoping that he would just say, no, I'm going in. But, Ina and I both had to say, like, oh, maybe you don't want to play, giving him an out so he doesn't feel bad about taking the out. He was 12 years old, I think. Mm-hmm. And he, not having it, not any part of it. He's like, nope, I'm going to play. He felt terrible. I don't even remember. Maybe he threw up that day there at the field. One time he did throw up at the field. I don't remember which one, and he played. He played very well. They won, and that kind of stood out as just he had a commitment to his team that I think just he shouldered that burden. And I think being a quarterback is a unique position. As we know, it's the most difficult position in sports, and I think that there's a variety of reasons it's so difficult, but I think it puts a lot on that person's shoulder, because they are the only ones that touch the ball every play, and so much rides on their shoulder. And I think it was a great, invaluable lesson, a lot of lessons that he got from that, and helped formulate and create who he is today. He can take blame and keep going. If he plays bad, it really impacts the team, and you just keep going. Put it behind you. It's just another day, and tomorrow you live to fight another day. And so, circling back to your question, entrepreneurial things, not a lot. He wasn't out, like I said, not creating businesses, but he was just very determined, committed, responsible, persistent. He wouldn't give up on things. He would just keep plugging through whatever it was.
Right. Did you think at some point because you guys had your own business with real estate. If you're real estate, believe it or not, you are an entrepreneur and you're in the prospecting business. If you are in real estate, a lot of people always said fall butt backwards in the business because they can't get a job or can't hold a job. But if you're in the real estate business, you have to prospect, just first off. But you guys were entrepreneurs. You guys had your own various and marketing kind of programs to generate leads and traffic, utilizing online businesses. I remember that. With that said, did you kind of think he would get into, start his own business? Did you think he was going to work for someone else? Or did you always kind of feel like he was going to get into something like this?
No, I thought he would go to work at a VC firm or a consulting firm. He wanted to consult for a while. That was a goal. And, he went to Carnegie Mellon, studied computer science. So it kind of, you can certainly be an entrepreneur after a degree like that. But I kind of felt like the venture capital world was the best way to go, because starting a company is tough and so many miss, and you can spend so many years. If you've got a great idea, great. Nobody knows if it's a good idea until you know.
And those windows open and close very quickly, right? Like
Yes.
you could have the best idea, and then Google thinks of it, or they acquire this or that, and these ideas can be flashes in the pan. But the great thing about real estate is it's a forever business if you can get it going, and you pound the pavement, which you did at a very early age, which is really special. So what lessons do you think you learned from your dad, and then what lessons do you want to make sure that he learned from you?
Well, my dad would always tell us about persistence. So that's a recurring theme, and we saw my dad's persistence pay off, and I even saw his persistence to a fault. And I saw that he would work so hard and use persistence almost as a crutch, because my dad has had a hard life, but a blessed life, because at the end of the day, everything has worked out for you, and I think it has because of your persistence. But then you lean on it and you say, well, I know my persistence has gotten me over the hump before, so I'm just going to keep pounding against this wall until something gives. And I think I grew up seeing that and going, you know what? I don't know if that makes sense. I recognize hard work is irreplaceable, but instead of pounding against the wall, I'm going to find a window to crawl through. And so
You're the work harder, not smarter, or work smarter, not harder.
Yes, I was sensitive to that and recognized that there had to be a better way.
Yeah.
So that was something I learned as far as what to do as well as what not to do. And so, I would say that is the biggest one. And going back to what you said about reputation, that's a invaluable lesson. I mean,
Yes.
I don't know how you knew to think that it was so valuable, but that was huge. That was always on our mind, that
Yes.
we wanted to make sure. It was almost, I remember me and Spencer, funny enough, had almost a competition over who could make the better impression on parents.
He's good.
He's good, right? You gotta, say your please and thank yous, shake your hand,
Look him in the eye,
all these things that people take for granted.
But it goes beyond that, though. It goes into how you behave, not just how you present in front of the parents. Like Spencer, he was kind of like Wally Cleave. No, not who was it? In Leave It to Beaver, an old show. Anyways, there was this kid, Eddie Haskell, and he was all wonderfully nice with the parents, so polite, so well behaved. As soon as the parents are gone, he's just a troublemaker. And,
Right.
That isn't what I was trying to preach. I was trying to preach, be this way in front of them, the parents, and then be that way when they're gone as well.
Well, he's always very well mannered. I will say, like, always respectful. You're not the guy that's breaking stuff or doing degeneracy throughout the city and such. We barely go out. We barely kind of partake in that amenity of life, which we can't afford to do. We could do if we wanted to, but it's funny, we just really don't elect to, because it's not really our path and goal, which is interesting. So with that said, I know there was one thing that you absolutely hated, and that was piano. However, I have seen you at very social gatherings where you do sit down at the piano and you start playing, and all of a sudden a crowd appears. So can you kind of walk us through your piano experience and maybe your thought process as to why you wanted him to play piano? So I guess let us know, to start, why you wanted him to play piano.
Well, I knew that music was good for kids. Any music, any kind of music, whatever it was, trombone, drums, anything. Hopefully not the drums, but so music is good. And the other thing I always would preach is that, whatever you play, you're not going to be playing it probably the rest of your life. And so you won't have any opportunities to play. Not many opportunities for most people. Like, let's say you play the clarinet. Well, where are you ever going to play that? You're not going to.
Yeah, right.
A guitar. Well, yeah, you can maybe bring it sometimes.
Similarly, sports is a window that opens and closes. Ain't no one playing
Yes.
tackle football.
No.
You can play golf, which I play, and I'm
Mhm.
very happy my parents got me into that, but I'm not playing baseball anymore. I'm not
Yep.
and then my fond memories are playing, Little League. I got to do the All-Stars because I was a good enough player. Similarly, I'm sure for yourself, playing football gives you these rosy memories, but to your point, exposing people at that age is cool. But back to the music, sorry.
Back to the music. And the other thing that I was always preaching is that girls will love you for playing the piano. And, that resonated with a young man.
Not at 7 years old, though.
No, I don't remember when I started preaching that, but it was at some point that it was.
But you also said that wealthy people have pianos in their homes.
Yes.
And there was innumerable times that I would walk into somebody's home, there's a piano, oh, cool piano, sit down, play, oh my gosh, this is great, yada, yada. So that is, was it worth all the crying and anguish and getting my hands banged against the keyboard by a strict Russian teacher? Yeah, probably. But yeah, basically, I started playing piano at 7, and we had very strict Russian classical teachers. So I was classically trained from a theory and playing perspective, and it was miserable. It was something that was forced upon me, and I think I resented the fact that it was forced upon me. All right, I lacked agency in the decision to play piano, and it wasn't until I had claimed some agency in the matter, not until like 14, 15 probably, where we switched teachers. We got a cooler teacher, a guy who played blues and jazz and pop, and all of a sudden I got to pick what music I wanted to play, and that was a transformative experience as it relates to piano and giving me back my agency. All of a sudden, before you know it, I like it. And also it helps to like something when you've developed a proficiency in it, right?
Oh, yes.
So from there, it turned into playing piano, teaching piano, making a lot of money, honestly, teaching piano on the weekends. Because, piano...
last I checked, that's entrepreneurial.
Yes,
okay.
I forgot. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and before that, I was a math tutor
Yes.
to piano teacher to quarterback
Yes.
coach. But anyway, it doesn't...
Right, I forgot. You see, I wasn't prepared for the show.
See, I have a comment right now on this. I think your brain developed a lot quicker because you're very intelligent. Ina's intelligent. But playing piano,
Yes.
speaking English, and then learning Russian.
Russian
You're okay. There you go. Fun fact: Russian first.
Yes.
Doing those things at that age leaves such a mental fingerprint, and you're probably using so many different parts of your brain that really activate. I guess different chambers, if you will, different maybe neurons. I don't know. I'm not a brain guy, but you know what I mean. Doing that at that age had to have enabled you to learn other skills and other kind of, other skills in learning other educational stuff and absorbing things at such a great clip, and probably gave you such an advantage over just the average individual, because most people aren't exposed to multiple languages. People are dyslexic like me who can barely read at young ages, let alone, playing the instrument in addition to, speaking 2 languages. So that's probably, in my opinion, one of the biggest reasons as to why you are able to absorb and comprehend and pick up things so quickly.
So back onto your fun fact, Russian was the first language, and so I had to learn it because I wanted to speak it to the kids. So I actually was able to speak Russian at the age of like 2.5-year-old kid, and after that, they got past me, and I couldn't speak only Russian anymore. So we had to open it up to English, and that was the end of it. Once you speak English a little bit, the whole house is speaking English. But so yeah, there's a fun. The other thing I wanted to go back to was playing piano, going into people's homes and playing pianos. I remember also saying this, that it was brand building. The parents love it because they all struggle to get their kids to play, and if you come in and play, they would think wonderful things about you. So I can remember that as well.
Yeah, well, it's a sense. What I think every parent wants to do, to my understanding, not that I'm a parent, to my knowledge, but what every parent wants you to do is to live and give your kids probably a better life and more experiences and leave them with more information and knowledge. They're going to end up doing with their life what they choose to, but at least on your front end, probably give them every advantage possible and give them structure, which you did very well, clearly. So good for you for doing that, which is awesome. So with that said, what was something that you feel like you were forced to do by your parents, other than piano, that you did not like to do? Was there any like chores or errands around the house you had to do? Was there like taking out the trash, doing the dishes? Because you're a very disciplined person, so I could see you being the person or the individual who had to do X, Y, and Z because your place is meticulously clean. You have zero clutter, not only in your personal life, but your physical space that you live in. So was that something that was passed down to you? Were your parents just meticulous? Were they basically cleaning everything? Because you are the most polished person from the exterior, whether how you run your business, how you want things to look from an aesthetic perspective, but then you get into your place at 20B, your apartment, and it is spotless and meticulous. So I have to imagine that trickled down from your parents to you, and you probably had to have some, rigid or very, very, very strict chores that you and Dasha had to do.
So my primary chore was taking out the trash. So I didn't enjoy it, but it's a chore. You had to do it, so no big deal. Nothing really interesting to say there. What was interesting was how messy our house was growing up. Like, it was a perpetual construction zone, right? So there was always construction happening. There was always construction folks coming in and out and barging into your private space. And we had a dog, we had a cat, we had hair everywhere, and if you could imagine me today living in an environment like that, it's the same exact thing.
Arguably one of the more OCD people. You're the most non-OCD but OCD person.
I was driven crazy by it, and I made sure that my room itself was my oasis. I didn't let the dog or the cat in that room. I made it sure it was spotless. That was my domain. And so I think because we grew up in a hectic household, because there was a lot of people, there was a lot of construction,
A lot of
kids, people coming in and out, it made me want to be such a clean person. And I always remember thinking about, okay, well, when I have my own space, it's going to look a certain way. It's going to be a certain way. It's shoes off. It's spotless. And, not everybody likes that, but it's what I want. It's what I learned from my upbringing.
See, I always figured he'd be the person that never had a dog in his house because he hates dogs, or just the idea of them. I don't know, which is probably it's the only unpersonable thing about you, which is funny. So, are you a dog person?
Oh, yeah, I love dogs.
I love dogs. You see me, like, if I see a dog walking, my head will turn and I will get giddy and smile, which is so funny. But that's just not who you are as a person. So, interestingly enough.
I think that's why he'll never have a dog, because hair everywhere. We had a yellow lab and just hair everywhere. And the cat would shed too, and it was just so hard to keep up. We had a little Roomba, but still, they'd overrun the Roomba, and it was hard to keep up with all that.
Right. Many moving parts, many moving construction jobs, as you said. So a perpetual state of things coming in and out, which is cool. But with that said, your multifamily journey. So how'd you get into it? I think you alluded to before, you kind of maybe wanted to in the early thousands, and you were just trying to figure out and hack that process. But I guess just tell us your journey of it and kind of, how you, maybe where you are today, but take us back to the start.
So throughout, going way back, like I said, into the 90s, I was looking at apartments like, a 6-plex or an 8-plex or something along those lines, and was trying to do the deal. Sometimes I would maybe even make an offer, not knowing how I would ever get it closed. I did that a couple of times and never got anywhere. I couldn't get a loan, didn't have enough money to pay cash, barely had enough money to really even invest in it. So I would try to, talk to my dad or somebody else, and it was just, I could never piece it together. And at some point I just gave up because it was just, as a 1099 person, I would 1099 from my own company. I never had a lot of taxable income to report, so getting loans was very, very difficult. But I didn't know that wasn't a barrier. That wasn't my flaw. My flaw was just not quite figuring it out. And I don't remember around, so as Rob got older, he started reading books because he was always a reader, always a big, big reader, digesting the material, reading a book a week, always reading. And at some point he started listening to Joe Fairless, and so that's where we got started. And I'm on the stationary bike every day, and he would say, listen to this, watch this, and he was feeding me. trying to get me to sell our home because we had a few million in equity in the house by that time. And that was his plan, is to, try to help me help myself. So we were, both studying Joe's stuff and listening and talking about multifamily. And it was something I was already interested in, but just never could really figure out how to do it. And I don't know at what point it was that he, felt like he had it figured out. He figured, no, we can do it. We can make it work. And he did. He eventually, we were together. So I guess going back a little bit there, I skipped over a very important part of it was we both really enjoyed listening to Joe's stuff, Joe Fairless. And we eventually took his mentorship course. We paid $10,000, and we were lucky because it went up to 40, then 50, and I don't know, now it's got to be, 100 grand if he's even doing it. Probably not doing it. But so we took his course, and part of Joe's course was he was available to you all the time until you closed escrow on your first deal. And he was there as a support person, guidance and everything else. So I really felt like, with Joe by my side, that we could do it, that we could, maybe make something happen. And so we went through the course, we studied, we picked our markets, we started, doing things, and we went to Joe's conference. I don't remember what year it was.
2018.
It was the best ever conference, and and I was there trying to meet people and connect and figure out how to do something in multifamily. And somehow Kent and I were in the same group, and we talked a little bit, and we were chit-chatting, and then Rob came wandering by and said, "Oh, and here's my son, by the way," and I don't remember how far he was into underwriting at that point, but I'm sure you
No,
were.
I was underwriting a lot, and
at that point.
Kent was telling you about deals he was looking at in Texas, and you said, "Oh, we're looking at deals as well. Rob's underwriting the deals. He can show you what he's got going on over there." And so Kent was interested.
Mm-hmm.
When we heard, we were talking with Kent, I think, about this recently, and because I think you asked him the question actually at the event. You said, "What made you want to partner with Rob when he was so young and unproven and all that stuff?" And Kent explained that, at that conference, he went specifically to that conference in mind to find a partner because he had some experience, had some network,
Yes.
but he didn't have the time because he had a full-time job, and he also wasn't in love with crunching the numbers, and that's exactly what I was doing. And so it was a very good fit at that time where you said, "Oh, well, my son's got to know his own model. It's really good, and he's crunching numbers all the time." And Kent was saying the other day, I took a look at the model. It was very good. And that's kind of how it kicked off that relationship.
Yeah, no, I forgot that aspect of it.
Yeah, and it is interesting that that's how it worked out because, it's like, oh no, we're going to do this together. It's, oh no, here's my son. You're going to do business together. So I guess to kind of retell that story and add a detail, not that it's specifically to you, but on your end, how long were you, I guess, talking with Kent after that experience of meeting at BEC in 2018?
Well, after that show, we were talking daily, pretty much. And we were talking to brokers together. We were underwriting deals together. We similarly were looking at putting in offers that we didn't really know how to perform on. But nevertheless, we were building those relationships, and we were getting that deal flow. And, the really funny thing is, looking back, is we were totally neglecting the big elephant in the room, which was equity. How are we going to raise the money for these deals, right? We were just so focused on the deal flow and the numbers, we didn't pay any attention to the
most important part, probably.
To the most important part, which is investors and building partnerships. Relationships take time. We all know all this stuff now, but that was the that was the progression. We went from BEC to talking every day, and then before you know it was only 2-3 months later that we had our first deal together under contract.
And that brings me to the really interesting point that I want to get into, which is something that if you're younger watching this, you may think about, and if you're a parent watching this, you think about, and that's the dynamic of the fact that I'm sitting with a college graduate, I'm a college graduate, and a college dropout. So you, as a parent, work so hard to prepare your children, to make sure that they do their SAT studying, to make sure they go to everything, to go to their class, to get their homework done. Although it sounds as if he was so disciplined he'd get all his homework done Monday night very quickly. Unlike me, I was someone that was a C student perpetually, but here we are now. But nevertheless, he calls you, he goes a year and a half or year and 3/4 of college, and I believe he went to London for an abroad program, utilizing the amenities that college has to offer, which I'm sure you had no fun out there, especially being able to probably legally consume alcohol in other countries if you did or didn't do that. But with that said, you get the phone call saying, hey, I'm going to drop out. So was this a surprise to you? Were you supportive of it? Were you, knee-jerk reaction, no? And then were you happy? Kind of tell us about your mindset of that, because that's not maybe the phone call the average parent in Atherton at least wants to hear, or Menlo Park, or from Silicon Valley, where literally everyone goes to college.
Yes.
So tell us about that from your side of it.
Well, it didn't catch me off guard because I'm always talking to him, and I know everything what's going on in both of my kids' lives. So there was rumblings, and we were talking about multifamily too. We were talking about all kinds of things. So there was a constant dialogue, and so when the call finally comes, it wasn't a complete shock. And by that time, I remember that I respected his decision-making process already. I think that he's got very, very good decision-making abilities, and I just kind of trusted, the path that he thought he wanted to go down at that time. And I was always just supportive, whatever it was. I tried to be supporting. If he wanted to become a ballerina, I'll be right there. I'll be at every practice, every performance.
Right. So it wasn't too scary for you to hear that conversation, or were you like, well, I guess he's going to figure out one way or another? Were you happy that he wanted to do it too? Were you proud of his initiative and wanting to kind of start his own business and create his own legacy in that regard? Or were you slightly apprehensive, but I guess here goes nothing, it's his choice?
As far as the multifamily?
Yeah, or just starting their own business and dropping out, and I guess, becoming entrepreneurial.
Well, the dropping out part never, no parent wants their kid to drop out. You feel bad, like maybe what did I do wrong or something, but that wasn't the case there. He just didn't really think that the path that he was on with school was going to be most conducive to getting him to where he wanted to be. He had found another path. He was poking at this, poking at that during college, and he finally had a path that he wanted to go down. And I think whatever path he was going to go down, I was going to be there supporting him 150%, and it probably would work out okay, because two heads is better than one, and I would be helping him, guiding him, as best I could. So it wasn't that traumatic for me. I was okay with it. Didn't like it, but he was already at that age. He was very determined, confident in his decisions, and he had a great track record of just making good decisions all his life. So it really wasn't, I was okay.
Very cool. So you have your own journey as well in the multifamily world, obviously outside of doing the mastermind and whatnot, but you mentioned before, the thought of, and Rob's convincing, of potentially selling the most important, the trophy asset, the Atherton house, and maybe, flipping that into some equity. So
yeah, well, let me just say, when I started crunching numbers and understanding the situation, and what's actually also interesting is my parents were open with their financial situation with their kids. So I know a lot of parents don't.
I had no idea ever what was going on in that regard. Zero. Zip.
Yeah.
Same with me, my dad.
Yeah, so we knew what was going on.
For the record, I still have no idea how much my dad makes, whatever his net worth is, and one of my friends will go nameless. You know who this can be. It's like, you ever ask how much your dad manages at Morgan Stanley? Do you ever ask what he makes a year, or what you're gonna get? I'm like, no.
I don't know how you don't ask.
I don't. I just don't. Is that weird that I don't ask?
I think it's very weird. I have to.
That's the McGrother way. You don't ask, you don't talk about it.
I have to know. I need to crunch the numbers. I need to know. I need to analyze the situation. So our family was open with money, and open with the struggles, open with the wins, and I was crunching the numbers, and I was looking at the situation, understanding how much money my parents made, and understanding how much equity was accruing over the last 20 years into the house. And I was thinking, well, okay, on paper there's a lot of equity in this house. they make a certain amount of money. If they stop working, that income stream goes away. And so I'm doing the math. I think, well, how are you going to retire? He was complaining all the time about working too much. He wants to retire. He says, I started doing dishes at 14. I've been working since I was 14. I don't want to work anymore. Okay, well, what are we going to do? So I'm just crunching the numbers, and it didn't make sense to me. And so being a stubborn kid and not being thoughtful or really empathetic with other people's emotions, I'm just banging the table on my parents and saying, sell your house and buy multifamily with the equity. The cash flow from the multifamily is going to pay for your retirement. It's going to supplant your income.
How old was this when you're doing your financial analysis and modeling of this, Mr. CFP over here? And then also, how long were you doing that for, and what age did that all kind of occur?
So I think I started going on about that rhetoric at 20, and then I think you guys, 2021?
I think it was before.
19?
Because think about it, right? You were still, you weren't away at college when we first started listening to podcasts and stuff. And when did you first go into Rich Dad Poor Dad? And
really young.
That's what I mean. So it was back then, because that's when you all of a sudden started saying, well, your house is a liability, not an asset. And
he had the biggest problem with that. He had the biggest problem. He thought, Robert Kiyosaki is a marketer. This is a scam. A house is not a liability. It's an asset. And we would go.
Anything that doesn't pay you is a liability in his world.
We would go back.
We would have arguments for years about that.
Did you kind of encourage him to read certain books, or were you just always lucky that you weren't, frankly, a nerd and reading basically fiction books, but you read nonfiction and financial? Because what if you just read Lord of the Rings and J.R.R. Tolkien and Game of Thrones, but you actually read stuff that was actually going to help you in your life? So did you point him in the right direction for that, or did you just find these avenues yourself?
Well, at some age, I forced him to listen. I had an MP3 collection, so I'd force him to listen to things like Think and Grow Rich, all kinds of stuff. I had tons and tons of Jim Rohn,
you were into
Covey.
Self-help type stuff,
Yes.
7 Habits.
And so he had a spreadsheet, and he would have to check it off that he listened to so many minutes each week. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think that's the genesis of consuming material, because that's when it started. Yeah, it was self-help stuff.
Yeah. So going back to the crunching of the numbers, right, I'm pounding the table. This doesn't make sense to me. You guys have all this equity in the house. What are you going to do to retire? And all this pounding on the table is making my mom cry, right? Because here she is.
Because you're right.
Her ego is attached to living in this house. This is the house that we grew up in. This is her home, right? It's not just an asset, it's a home. It's where they live. It's the neighborhood, the community, and also the pride and the ego associated with owning a home in Atherton and being a homeowner versus being a renter.
Also, much like my parents, they bought the probate house for $500K in 1991. That was, someone died in the house basically. It was terrible, total project as well. Mm-hmm. But to your point, and to their point, they have pride and ownership because they did everything to the house. They've done 2 remodels to the house. Similar to your mom's point and to you, yeah, you have a lot more emotional attachment when you are legitimately, if you could be shoestringing at one point, putting everything together, putting your own love and detailing into it. That's not just, hey, I bought a spec house in Atherton, that's just another house. That's your house, and you took pride in that. So it's a different mentality if you do that as well.
Well, it also felt like, I don't know if you shared the sentiment, but it felt like, I think for her, that if to sell the house meant to fail, it meant giving up on the dream.
Yeah, we
on that dream.
We had originally planned to, build a 10,000-foot house there, and that was the plan. We were gonna, I was just gonna do it, come hell or high water. That's what I was gonna do, and I still to this day feel like I failed because I really, really wanted a 10,000-foot house in Atherton.
That sounds like a nightmare to me.
Yeah.
It's just so opposite because you are Mr. Minimalism, Mr. No Clutter, Mr. Simplify My Life, never own anything directly, but always put my money into Lone Star or various other funds, and I don't want to deal with it. I just want to see the checks come in and streamline my life. So it's so funny, the difference. And then Mr. When I pack, the lightest packer I've ever seen.
Yes.
Everything goes with everything. So it's
packing. We should have an episode about packing at some point.
Yeah.
That's a good topic.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think slowly we broke down the barrier and we were able to actually meet some common ground and have a conversation about this seriously.
An unemotional, logical one.
Right.
Because before that, it was tough.
Right.
Tough.
Yeah. So, we can obviously fast forward to the point where you actually did list the home for sale and at nearly the top of the market. So, luck is on your side again. Amazing. Bought at the bottom, selling at the top. And then you rolled most of the equity from that sale into essentially 300 multifamily units in Texas. And that was now your new challenge, your new job. But
that
also
was your 10,000 square foot house.
Yeah, there it goes, right? Yeah.
And then that was also your setup for generating a retirement income stream, right? So you could finally realize your dream of not working.
Yes, absolutely. All true. And, I remember one of the things, this was basically the vast majority of the money that we had was in the house. And, when it came time to actually sell, and when I was able to convince Ina to sell, due to his prodding, and well, not just prodding, but there's logic. It wasn't like, I'm just going to convince you. No, there's numbers behind it. And I understood the numbers. I always liked apartments. I loved it. But he figured out how to do the equity, how to do the debt, and he convinced me, and I convinced my wife. And when I was going to sell the home, I was promising her, looking her in the eye, saying, I promise I won't lose our home money. I promise you I won't. And I didn't. I put it into Texarkana, and I've tripled it at least, as opposed to losing it. So for that, I'm grateful to him, because I came into multifamily kicking and screaming and, fighting for years and arguing about the home, because I was anchored to the home idea as well as Ina. Both of us were.
And it's funny, as a former realtor like you are, we all think, the home, it's so important. But you realize, actually, as I learned, it's kind of a trap. It's not easy. There's zero economies of scale. One miscellaneous thing comes up and you're over your budget and over your numbers, as opposed to the multifamily world. It's substantially more scalable, and there's a lot more meat on the bone and value to add in that respect, which is the really unique thing about the business that we're in now and the business that you've got yourself into as your retirement job.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's passive,
retirement.
Entirely passive.
Right. Well, you could 1031 exchange, just like all of you back home could, into a Lone Star Capital deal should you have $1 million or more of equity to transfer in. Just for the record, not DST, but tick structure, please. With that said, very interesting that you went down that route and transitioned. So, very cool.
And let's unpack it a little bit more, because it's not so easy to triple your money.
No.
Right?
No.
And
it's not easy to triple your money?
No, it's not. Triple your money. Right?
And also not over a 40-year span like the S&P 500 would, but in a condensed
4-year span.
As Hunter Thompson says, no one cares if you made $1 million in 10 years. The guy that makes $1 million in a year is interesting, because it's all about speed. So the speed of it is the X factor, of course.
Right. So you took your construction background, your tolerance for risk, and we wrapped it up into a major value add program where we bought this property, as a family that had 200 down units basically. And we had all these renovations to do, all this risk, all this crime that basically you and your wife took on their shoulders, and mostly Ma. So that was a transformative thing for our family, and I feel like she got to be the boss that she had inside of her all along.
Yes,
because now she's
an
incredible manager of these properties, of the team on site. So, but that was a stressful time for our family, because now we jumped into the deep end. Deep end, right? So what do you want to share about that experience?
And also, let me ask, at any point where you're like, pardon my friend, what the did I get myself into? Like, we were like, did I really just freaking do this? Or were you confident or just no looking back, zero rear view, blinders on like a horse at Del Mar, only looking forward?
Del Mar, yeah. No, and I'll tell you why. You would think most people would have these misgivings, but when we closed escrow, there was a huge CapEx budget, and all the units almost were down. It was just in terrible condition, and it was half empty. And of the 50% occupancy, I don't remember what percent wasn't paying. So it really was. It was an amazingly rundown place. They had been cannibalizing other apartments for years to keep the other ones going because there was no money going into it. But almost all of our money was going into this property. So we loaded up our minivan with everything we could possibly fit. It was so heavy, and we drove out to Texas. The Beverly Hillbillies, and the Atherton Hillbillies.
But the other way, because most migration is from middle to west, chasing the California dream. You were chasing the Texan dream.
You're chasing yield.
Yeah, exactly.
Chasing yield, yes.
Stabilized yield on cost.
So basically, we moved in more or less for the first 14 months because there's such a huge CapEx budget. I couldn't just give it to somebody. There's no way I could. It was my hard-earned money, and so I felt if I'm going to oversee this, I'm not going to oversee it from California. I have to be right there. So basically, we remodeled a 3-bedroom apartment for us, and it looks right down at the office, and my desk is right there, and I very, very hands-on, still very, very hands-on, but I wasn't fearful because I knew what it was. I knew the surrounding occupancy was well into the 90s, and this property was just grossly mismanaged, and so those 200 units could be readily filled. I was very, very confident that we could get that property up to speed. So I really didn't have those. It was tough. It was difficult dealing with. It's a small town, Texas, and the labor pool is very shallow, and the people we were hiring were just at the bottom end of that shallow pond. It was just very, very difficult.
We did plenty of aluminum remediation ourselves.
Yes, we were out
going around with the special screwdriver. We were on the roof.
Yep.
What were we doing on the roof?
Well, the tree branch, one of the tree branches was actually grown into the roof, and it was, so we were up there, he and I with a chainsaw, and
I'm sure the agency lenders really love that, I bet.
Oh.
Well, they should. Yeah. We're very hands-on borrowers. I was up there with a chainsaw.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we were.
So he can do little manual labor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes one of us because I can't.
Yeah. It was a heck of a journey, and it still is a journey, and we've still got a ways to go, but we're I think at 91% across 300 units, and at one point we were in the low 40s of occupancy because when we took over we had to kick people out because they weren't paying, and the prior management wasn't kicking these people out, and so here's these people not paying, not respecting the property.
Were they doing drugs there? Were they?
Oh no,
was
no.
it gangbanging?
Nobody would do any of that.
Right. Not under your roofs, of course.
Oh, there was,
in Atherton or in Texarkana.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was an interesting journey, but I don't regret it because it got me out of single family homes, which I never enjoyed. Like I said, nobody goes to college thinking, "Oh, I'm going to sell homes." No, nobody does that. Well, maybe somebody does.
Yeah, maybe one person in this room. Yeah.
And so, when my day came and Ina said, I asked again and again, and one day she said, yes, you can turn off your website. And I was, thank you. And that was it. No more home sales.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and I was just so grateful, so happy. And, never looked back after that. People have reached out to me and I'm like, nope, I'm not doing any transactions. I don't want any part of it.
Outside of Dasha and Rob, would you say that turnaround is the thing you're most proud of in your life and accomplishing that and setting you and your family up and your retirement up? Because now you live, I would say, more large than not. You have amazing travel now. You kind of get to live life on your terms. Would you say that is, as I said, outside of your kids, the thing you're most proud of?
I don't know. It's a good question. I'm a very humble guy, so I'm not proud of many things.
What else do you have for us before you take us home? Because
we do have to depart for a very swanky dinner tonight at a very exclusive and fun cigar lounge or restaurant. I don't necessarily know the setup of it, but all I know is I come here and Rob says, hey, we're going to here, here, and here for dinner, and I just show up with a good attitude. So with that said, we got to wrap up soon, but you have a couple fun little hobbies. One of them is credit card hacking. How'd you get into that?
Him. He introduced me to credit cards shortly before I retired. And once I stopped selling homes, I needed something else to really dive into because I'm I go after something and I don't give up, and I think he's got it too. And it's like a dog with a bone. And he gave me a little glimpse. And I grew up not having money. And so all of a sudden I understood that I could afford to travel first class and business class and stay at incredible hotels. And there's a path to that, and that's kind of the genesis of it, wanting to travel high class, just to go everywhere. And now that I was retired, I
never got to travel before.
I was tethered to football or I was tethered to work. And those are my tethers. And as a real estate agent, it's very, very difficult. You go on vacation and you miss a deal, right? So there's a big commission that you're going to miss out on because somebody said, oh, I want to buy that house, and you're not around to do it.
Well, if you want to get busy as a real estate agent, all you have to do is go out of town. So,
yes.
That's all you have to do is just go on vacation and your phone magically starts to ring. It's funny how it works. Yeah.
That's the way the world goes.
So what 3 credit cards would you get or would you have if you were to if no one had a credit card or if someone's looking to reshuffle their deck, but don't cancel your first one because that's bad for your line of credit. So I understand. You would know best. But what would you have to create a perfect 3-card stack?
Well, you have to have a card that's going to be 2 points on everything. And that's, I think, the biggest thing where people fail or don't pay attention, and that they put their credit card spend, their organic spend, on a 1-point card. And so, there's a few cards that are no annual fee, which is the Citibank Double Cash card and the American Express Blue Business card. Those are both.
The Platinum looks so cool.
The Platinum looks great. And, I've got a few of them. And the card that I have in my wallet is the Citibank No Annual Fee Double Cash card. It's 2 points on everything, and that's where I put my spend. But we do, as a family, we have, I think, 60 cards probably, which is terrible to say.
I remember when you came to visit in Arizona, this is earlier on, and you had your little, like a lot of people have CDs back in the day, if you have a little book like that, and this guy had his little book of all these credit cards. I'm like, what is this? Because my parents are not that way at all. My parents are not as unorthodox in their methods of creating wealth. My dad's a financial advisor. You put this in stocks, bonds, CDs, whatever. So maybe a couple credit cards. That's it. But it's so cool that you guys hack it and are outside the box thinkers in that regard, which is cool. Finally, we didn't get a chance to get into this at some point, but I think the next time we have you on, we're going to go through something that's special and really unpack the blog that you have, which is called the Nectar Blog, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
So that'll be something we get into at some point. But thank you so much for listening to episode 20 with the special guest, Todd. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. And for the record, he has been so helpful for me. I don't think anyone comments and listens to more thoroughly and fully to every single thing that we say than him. So thank you so much for being such a cheerleader for us, for being supportive, for just being there.
A parent.
I very much so appreciated our relationship that we have so far and can kind of continuing that moving forward. It's so fun to get to see you, get to know you better, spend time. Looking forward to having dinner tonight with you and, of course, you. Once again, episode 20. Thank you for listening. Peace.